Oh,
Good morning. I'm Carolyn Cox, and welcome to the September 27th, 2022 meeting of the Lacey Land Use and Environment Committee. There are two of us here today, so we'll be taking turns offering motions and seconds. So, Robin, could I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda for our meeting on September 27th for the Land Use Committee.
Good one. All right, I'll second the motion. Do you have any comments on the agenda, Robin?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. So all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. We have an
We have an
agenda.
agenda.
Yay. All righty. And first up, I think is Hans here?
yeah, he'll be coming on online here in just a few minutes. And as he does that, I'll just kind of give a quick preamble. As you may remember or recall, last July Land Use Committee meeting, we were kind of coming out final stretches of implementation strategies for the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan that the city adopted. We were looking at some of the Lacey priorities and setting up for the budget conversation. And at that time, we talked about a few of those priorities, and one of them being specifically, what is that energy efficiency and audit program, efficiency improvements. And we had a timeline of trying to implement some versions or looking at programs that we could implement in 2022 to help move that ball forward for Lacey households to have opportunity or awareness of various programs out there, or something that the city can supplement or partner with or create. And so today Hans is going to go through a quick overview of some of the programs we see as kind of the next steps and where they are in timeline. And then we'll be able to open up for question and answer with the Land Use Committee. So with that, I'll turn over to Hans to start his presentation on what he's discovered, some of the programs we have identified thus far, and start the conversation.
Hey everyone, I'm on a new computer here and it looks like my background filter isn't working yet, so you all get to see the inside of my office/bedroom, so that'll be fun.
Where the magic happens.
Indeed. So yeah, with that, thank you, Rick. I'll jump into my slides. I have a couple that I've pulled together for the presentation. If I can find, there it is. All right, let's go. Am I sharing the, just the
Yes.
slide, or do you get the slide deck as well next to it?
We can see the slide deck.
All right, let me see if I can give you a better view here. I have too many screens. Is that the slide deck again?
Perfect.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so this is the residential energy efficiency program. This was something that we initially presented to you guys earlier this year. The program really focuses on ways to improve energy efficiency of the existing housing stock within the city.
Hans, you're
Yep.
sharing your notes.
Oh, wonderful.
Not the slide itself.
I don't. How about
Got
now?
to show the application and
There
not
you
the
go.
screen.
That's
There we
it.
go.
All right, let's do this. So there we go. Okay, better.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
So as a little bit of background, a lot of the justification for why we're looking at this is that within our region, the existing housing stock is one of the primary contributors to greenhouse gases. And looking towards 2050, when we have a lot of our target markers, the existing housing stock is going to be the primary contributor to that. So while new houses are being built, it's really the existing housing stock that we want to emphasize as part of this project, because that's really where the majority of those gains and opportunities are that can be made. So as a little bit more of the background, within the TCMP, there were a range of tasks that were outlined that really specifically were targeting this area of emphasis, and we're looking at existing housing stock. This is one of the links that was included in the staff report, but some of the high-level actions were things like residential energy performance ratings, residential energy audits, rental housing energy efficiency incentives, property taxes, and rental housing energy efficiency as kind of a baseline metric. And then a lot of those goals are also echoed within our comprehensive plan and the affordable housing strategy within the city. So those are really consistent themes throughout, that this is something that we recognize and really want to advance. So starting off within this program, one of the things we recognize that there's a lot of other players out there, all the way up at the federal, at the state, and even at the local level, that in some way or another offer programs or services that work to address some of these challenges that our existing residents are facing. So the first step that we wanted to do was identify what a lot of those programs are, figure out what their offerings are, and then maybe figure out where some of those disconnects exist, or where existing residences are struggling to fully utilize those programs. So with that in mind, we did a pretty deep dive into quite a few different programs. I'm only going to list 4 of the ones that we looked at here, but the first one is the Efficiency Boost program. This is a PSE program. It's a rebate program that focuses on providing financial assistance for energy-oriented improvements to homes. They do have just an open one that's available to anyone that wants to do energy updates to their homes. This one that we looked at here is targeted at that 80% of area median income, and it's actually the rebates associated with this program are double or significantly more than just the one that's open to the community. So we really wanted to look at where those larger dollar figure opportunities are. So this is one of the ones that we looked at. And then there's the low income weatherization program. This is one that is run through the Community Action Council, but it actually pulls funding from the state level, the federal level, and then also actually gets additional funding from PSE. So it's kind of a collection of different funding streams that come together to provide this program. And it actually goes into homes, does assessments, and then provides recommendation and also weatherization services. And that is more of a case-by-case basis. So that is based on those initial findings. So it's not you do this upgrade and you get this dollar rebate kind of thing. It's more case by case in that sense. And then there's the Home Energy Assessment Program. This is one that's offered through the PSE online portal. It's a self-guided online assessment. So given this does rely on individuals knowing what's going on in their homes, and then being able to report that accurately online. But with that, then it gives a range of recommendations based on the reported conditions of your home, as far as ways to improve your home's energy efficiency, improve your monthly bills, reduce those costs, a range of different other comparisons. And it also gives you kind of a snapshot between how you're doing and maybe your neighborhood as a whole, just to kind of give you another working metric of where you're falling in that list. And then the last one that we looked at is actually in-home energy assessment programs. And there are actually a couple that have existed historically. One is through Thurston Energy, and the other one was actually offered through PSE. Both have actually been discontinued in the last few years. The Thurston Energy one, which was the more prominent one, was discontinued after 2017, but it worked to provide residents and businesses with discounts, rebates, and financing and tax incentives to increase returns on their investments. Again, though, this is no longer currently active as a program that's out there. So after identifying those programs, we wanted to dig a little bit deeper and figure out within the community how many people are actually utilizing these programs. So looking back to the beginning of 2021, we found that only actually 6 Lacey residents have participated in the Efficiency Boost program. 36 participants have participated in the weatherization program. And then the self-guided online one, looks like 1,443 participants were involved in that one. Given these are Lacey specific residents and participants, so these programs do exist and are offered outside of Lacey, but we really wanted to take that Lacey specific look at to see within our community how many people are actually being served by these programs that exist out there. And then we also wanted to look at just a little bit more demographic information to see who's qualifying for these programs and who they are as a target audience, so that when we go back out and try to expand our reach and get more people introduced to these programs, we know where to focus our energy. So as far as demographics go, the average participant was actually 53 years old, retired with some college background, and then primarily single family homeowners as a general profile of who's being reached by these. So people with a little bit of extra time, with some education background, and primarily homeowners, not renters, is kind of the profile that we see there. And then some of the, we also wanted to find out about where those program barriers are. So we know who they're reaching, but we're also trying to figure out who they're not reaching and what some of those reasons are behind why that disconnect is happening. And as far as challenges associated with the programs, there's a lack of awareness is a pretty huge one. So just knowing that these opportunities are out there and then being able to take advantage of them. Application requirements, depending on what the program is, there are requirements in order to qualify for each one of these. And then competing priorities, it does involve allocating your time to this to go through the program process, apply for it, gain approval, and actually get that rebate or whatever it might be. And then funding is another one. So these programs also operate on limited funding. And then the total costs of improvement. So what the resident would have to invest versus the rebate that they get back in return. That is a financial cost, and that was identified as a barrier. And then staffing and capacity challenges within these programs was another one. Sometimes there is a pretty decent wait list on these programs to go through them and actually get that rebate or whatever that program return might be. And what we're finding is that without these resources, it is very challenging to really prioritize these types of home improvements and or to really understand the potential benefits that are gained by going through those steps to improve the energy efficiency of your home. That's realized more on the kind of home comfort and your monthly costs associated with those improvements that are kind of played out over a longer time period. So without having that knowledge, without having that information, it's difficult to prioritize these types of investments that also meet a lot of those goals that we set out to achieve. So looking forward, we pulled together a list of kind of near-term implementation tasks that we've identified that could really start to shift those scales and kind of make a pretty immediate return on some of these goals. The first one being is a partnership with existing programs. So specifically PSE. PSE has a few different rebate programs that exist out there. And there's definitely opportunities to provide additional funding matches for those. I don't know how tiny that text is on your guys' end, but that's a snapshot of some of the rebate programs that are out there. This is a longer list. I can definitely connect you with where those exist, but just to give you an understanding. So if you're looking to replace single pane windows, for example, you would get $200 per window, up to $2,000 back on that return if that was the kind of investment you're doing. So opportunities exist to essentially match these rebate programs for Lacey residents to increase that incentive.
And these rebate programs are still connected to income, right? There's an income verification process for many of these to qualify.
For many of these, yes. Yep. So this is the snapshot that you're seeing here is the program that we looked at earlier, the Energy Boost. which has the 80%.
For 80% of median income.
Mhm. So there is also open-ended one, and there is a 60% area median income as well. We could look at opportunities to provide matching funds in each one of these scenarios. These are nice that it is kind of a flat dollar figure, that when you do an upgrade, it's attached to a pretty clear cut. This is the rebate that you get for it. So there's not a whole lot of administration or analysis on our end as far as what it takes to really provide that funding. You qualify, you're a Lacey resident, you get that rebate, which is really appealing in that sense that it doesn't involve a whole lot of additional review on our end to really make sure that applicants meet that criteria.
And just to clarify, PSC has this rebate program for all households. And then they also have different rebate schedules for household incomes, for the lower household incomes. And so with this program, it could be applied just as the PSC is doing, that it can be accessible for all Lacey households if we partner with PSC. And then, of course, the greater the rebate for those individual items may be greater for households of 80% or less. I just want to be clear about that. And then what we could look at is partnering with PSC to be 100% match or whatever that is, and then help promote that to Lacey households to try to get better awareness and access to the program.
Mm-hmm. And that hits on one of the other big kickers with this program, is that looking at the last year and a half, there's only been 6 Lacey participants in the Boost program. So kind of building off of what Rick was just saying there, that the awareness component is a pretty significant element of these programs. While they do exist and they do offer rebate opportunities, we've heard that there's not a whole lot of awareness on these programs out there. So using our communication channels to really boost that opportunity and really get that out there into the community would be another way to really help this program as well.
Have we used the Lacey, is it the Lacey News, the thing that comes out with the water bill, Rick? What's that called? Lacey Life? Lacey Life.
And that's one of the things we can use. And we talked about this program being potentially implemented in 2 to 3 months. It can be a low hanging fruit. We just got to make sure we have the agreement with PSC, piggyback, and that they would manage it for Lacey households. But yeah, we would promote it through our social media outlets, the utility bill inserts, and other mechanisms to make sure we get awareness out to Lacey households. And it could be well timed too, going into the winter holiday months as well with some of these programs too.
And we do already have some materials and kind of promotional material kind of stuff that raises awareness for these. They haven't gone into Lacey Life yet, but we are in the process of finding a slot in that newsletter. Sometimes it's a pretty well-stacked newsletter, so trying to carve out a spot for this. But yeah, that is definitely something that we've been talking about and advancing.
Well, Hans, is that something that, if the materials exist now, you could perhaps have at our booth at the Children's Festival?
That would be something we could definitely print out and make available.
Yeah, for the existing program, but need to have the agreements in place with PSC for the if we were able to develop a Lacey match for the rebates.
Right.
But do you think sorry, go ahead.
Do you think it makes sense then to try to promote it at the Children's Festival?
I think just the PSC program as it is, yes. And that and then as we develop the agreement, we can do a big push about an announcement that we have this additional opportunity.
Okay.
We've also chatted with PSC about, they also offer promotional staffing at booths and events. So as their current programs, they also are willing to come out and attend events and do that based on their current programs. I think our opportunity and kind of where that excitement comes from is that if we also contribute and kind of make that Lacey component, that's a great kind of opportunity to get that promotion out there and really kind of start pushing that and advertising that. But yeah. And then this is also viewed as, I should say, a 2 to 3 month timeline. So definitely this year, we can really start to be getting this information out and actually start working on that agreement with PSC to really start doing those matches. So this is definitely on that shorter timeline as far as quick returns that we can do to make a significant difference. Another one that we were looking at was building off of the idea of the self-guided in-home energy assessments. So a lot of the equipment necessary to actually conduct these assessments of your home are pretty steep in price. And they're also, they really have their one use or specific use kind of tools. So once you perform that task, there's not a whole lot of long-term value for them. So finding a way to actually create some kind of rental program where we can actually address some of those upfront kind of high barrier to entry costs and acquire that equipment and make that available for individuals and residents within the community that are actually interested in performing that home assessment, but are not interested in making some of those larger upfront cost investments and then holding on to this equipment that really is only kind of a sole purpose type of use. So looking at actual potential partnership with Timberland Regional Library to host some kind of rental program where we can have things like appliance meters, voltage detectors, thermal cameras, moisture meters, carbon monoxide detectors, a lot of those tools that are most commonly utilized in performing a home energy assessment. So this would be really kind of empowering the community to take on some of these. And then we could also have informational material on how to use these tools within their homes and kind of what those findings would look like and what to do with that information. So that's another program that we looked at. That's roughly a 3 to 5 month kind of timeline on what that would take. The acquisition of the material or the supplies would be pretty quick turnaround, but then actually building that program up and launching it and making sure that the rental agreement is how we want it might take a little bit more time. So that was another program we talked about. And then the final program that's really looking at that short-term timeline is potentially contracting with existing energy assessors. And this program could mirror a lot of what we have going on with our arborists currently for tree inspections. So it would be contracted energy assessors that would actually go out into the community and provide these services. They bring a lot of a significant amount of knowledge and expertise to the home assessment process. And then also the Department of Energy has a standardized certification process that they actually go through to provide home energy score assessments. So it's a pretty well-defined process that they go through and kind of a checklist that they run through. And then they could also serve as information experts within the community. So helping connect with community members and then also directing them towards existing rebate programs and other opportunities that are out there. So really providing that service, but then also being our kind of face in the community and actually having that one-on-one conversations to really help connect people with existing opportunities and programs. This one would require an RFP process, but then it also kind of on that slightly longer timeline has the ability to really go into homes and have that more one-on-one interaction that we're looking for. And then this slide is kind of a summary of those 3 programs. But yeah, did somebody have a question?
Oh, I was just curious whether we considered a single source or a direct buy. I don't know the size of the contract that we're contemplating for those folks that would, like the arborists, come out and do the inspections or the assessments.
Well, the kind of what that program could look like, and reason why it's a longer lead time to implement, because we got to set up the program parameters and then figure out how we would manage it once we know what we're managing. And so there are a lot of good examples out there. And if you remember in the beginning of Hans's presentation, there was reference to the Community Action Council weatherization program where households of 60% or less income, they would do a energy audit, figure out what the best bang for their buck, and then what that improvements were, help them fund those improvements with a stable of contractors. And of course, those are federal fund program, and because they're just targeting 60% or less, we didn't necessarily say this would be a great partnership because we want to try to have this accessible to all households because the energy efficiencies are necessary to be addressed through all households. Hans referred to the old, it's no longer around, the Thurston energy program, which was the same model. Basically, go out, do an assessment. What are the best? What are the inefficiencies in the whole house envelope, and then what are the upgrades, and then funding those upgrades through a low interest loan.
What are the incentives that you might be eligible for with your specific situation?
Exactly. And then that program's no longer around because that was supported by a federal legislation that provide funding for those type of purposes that is no longer available. And so that's why that program has gone away. But we have all that information. We can access the people that are involved with it and look at how we maybe model something after that. And then developing that framework, and then we might be able to set up a audit and weatherization program for Lacey households and look for a partner to help manage that process. And maybe it's something like we would pay for the audit with the contractors. We may be able to share the list of approved contractors that CAC is currently using, do the assessments, and then fund up to a certain level those upgrades, or depending on the income level of the homes, maybe it's a grant, a rebate, or a zero interest loan, some type of mechanism to help fund some of those actual improvements. But again, those are things we got to put the parameters around and find and see if there's a partners out there that can help us manage that, because we would not be able to manage it with current staffing. But we could be able to provide the funding for that program to occur. So that's kind of it's a more of a 6 month plus lead time, so we can work out all those details. And then of course, with the energy efficiency boost program, as Hans said, we can, depending on our conversation with PSC and get an agreement there, that could be something we can bring online potentially this year. And through that process, we could probably do the equipment rental, or maybe it's a checkout system from the library's enhancements, and just so people can have access to the tools so they can do their own assessment, and then they can maybe look at what rebates they want to apply for based on that assessment.
Where is the budget to support these programs?
So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we had talked about this last July. There is currently a climate action implementation budget of about $260,000. And so we kind of put numbers in the bottom of those columns, just kind of represent what we can get started with, because also we're operating with some unknowns once we launch. So like with the energy efficiency boost program, kind of put $50,000 to help supplement those rebates. Maybe there's more demand once we get the promotion out. We may need to slide some money over to it, or maybe there's less demand and we can slide the money to the other programs. And then as we go forward, we can track that, and then we can make specific budget requests on a year-to-year basis to help support that program. One other thing I think it's important to note as we look at getting this type of energy efficient audit and upgrade programs in place, this is also something that's identified in a regional conversation. And then ultimately there's some conversations about developing a standardized efficiency rating system. And we can kind of start that process through this, get people aware of that energy efficiency rate. And if that does come online in the near future as a regional program, we already kind of laid some groundwork in Lacey of how that could work and function and support that future effort. And then also too, if they were successful in this program, they can also be an example too at the regional table about how it can be expanded into other jurisdictions. And I'm going to draw a parallel to our economic strategies with our small business training program, specifically the one targeted for BIPOC entrepreneur and business owners. When we started providing scholarships for that type of specific training, it was successful. Now Olympia and Tumwater are doing scholarships for their residents to access that training as well. And we can kind of create some programs similar to that moving forward.
If memory serves, the Department of Commerce, which supports the weatherization program, it's part of the state portion of the funding. I think they also gather data. So they may have a list of contractors that provide those services. We probably also have a list, but I wonder if Commerce has some feedback on quality and performance of the vendors doing that work. Like we could target invitations to participate in the RFP to vendors that are doing this work well.
Yep, that's a great lead. We'll definitely explore what databases Commerce has, as well as community action.
Yeah, on that note, really quickly, there is an International Association of Home Inspectors is a essentially kind of a program that provides certification. And there's 3 different tiers of certification attached to that process and their level of expertise. And then within that, there's also there's a range of different badges that essentially that assessors get. And there's 3 within our regional area that really kind of hit that tier that we're looking for, that can provide those types of services, that are also actually certified mentors. So if we were ever interested in potentially bringing this service in-house or anything like that, there are training avenues there that we could explore as well. So yeah, there's definitely quite a few different lists of inspectors in the region that all have attached ratings attached to them that we're looking at as far as who we might target for this.
So in summary, this is where we are right now. We're working to move forward on the implementation for pieces of it, the low hanging fruit in 2022. As we move forward and maybe get the agreement in place with PSE, we'll make sure we'll come back to the land use committee or the council at a full work session to update you all so you see the progress of and when things will actually be launched, and then keep you apprised of progress of developing this home assessment and weatherization program leading into probably 2023. But our goal is to keep moving on that and have something in place and moving forward, or at the very least having the home audit certification process in place. We can't get to the weatherization upgrade piece of that parcel. So it's a 2-part project.
So Rick or Hans, do you need action like for this committee to make a recommendation to council to support moving forward with these programs?
No, we're just looking for, are we on the right track? Because it is part of the adopted climate mitigation plan and implementation strategy, and it's a budgeted item. We just want to make sure that there's no concerns or issues that you as a council committee see that we need to maybe address.
Well, I think, it definitely fits within the vision set out in the TCMP. We already have done a lot of work on electric vehicle charging stations, and we have ongoing work with electrifying our fleet. So this being the largest source of carbon output seems like exactly where we need to be working. So I think you all are heading in definitely the right direction.
Yeah, life is complicated. I think uptake on these programs will improve if we can make it easier for people to be aware of them and access them. So if it is something we can do just to make them more visible and simpler to access, I think we'll see greater uptake, and that's a benefit to Lacey. So I think you're moving in the right direction.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? This is the last slide in my presentation. It really just breaks down what the program is, the associated actions, if we're a partner or a lead on it, who would be the primary management for the program, timeline, and then estimated amount of funding that might be allocated towards each one of these.
It also answers my question about why we wouldn't just do a sole source or a direct buy, because that one's a little bit higher dollar figure. So we need to do an RFP.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Han, thank you very much. This was very insightful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you, Hans.
Ready for me?
Well, you're on mute, Councilmember Cox.
So sorry. So next up is Grant with the quasi judicial permitting process update.
Thank you, and I'll not beat things to death. You've seen the big slide deck and have reviewed this a number of times, but based on the last study session where we talked about this, we've prepared an ordinance and a staff report that the council will see next week. at the regular meeting for consideration that basically makes the hearing examiner's decisions final and appealable to court under the Land Use Petition Act. And as you may recall, the three options for the council are either to make the decision themselves. So the examiner, under the current system, the examiner makes a recommendation to the council. The council can also be the appellate body, a local appeal. So the examiner's decision could be appealed to council, or the examiner's decision can be final and appealable to court. The reason we went with the last one was we heard that the council wants to be able to interact with the citizens during the process. So if you're even in the appeal position, the Appearance of Fairness Act would apply, and you couldn't have any ex parte contact with citizenry during the course of the permit application from start to finish until you make your decision. So that's what we've put together for your consideration next week. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the middle part of Rick's presentation at the study session, which is kind of why we're in this weird system right now and the changes back in the mid-90s to the land use permitting process that created it. And so Lacey adopted the hearing examiner system in 1979. And at that time, there was very little direction in the state law about how local jurisdictions should go about permitting things. So it was rather, and this is a technical term, loosey-goosey. So we could basically make up the process as we went along. At that time, the examiner's decision was a recommendation to council, but the council could ask for additional information from staff, the developer, or the public, hold their own public hearing on the matter, or just base the decision on the record. That was fairly common back in the day. And as you might imagine, not here, but elsewhere, that kind of process was causing some grief in court because it was a little bit loosey-goosey. So there's a lot of the decisions, land use decisions at the time, were appealed and overturned. And effectively over time, the legislature realized that the permitting system needed to be revamped and streamlined and kind of done the same everywhere. So in 1995, the legislature adopted the Regulatory Reform Act, which the city then codified in our Lacey Municipal Code. The key provisions of that law were that project decisions have to be made based on our development regulations. So it took away a lot of the discretion of the hearings body, the decision makers, in looking at, general policies or goals to either condition or deny a development application. It has to be in the code. The second big sea change was it limits the review process to a single open record hearing and one closed record hearing. And so that's what kind of put the council in the lose-lose situation you're in now, because the council then could no longer obtain information on the project outside the record that was created by the hearing examiner. So you couldn't have that second public hearing or request additional information once the open record hearing was closed. So we kind of lived with that up until now. So that I just kind of wanted to go over that because that was really the sea change where we really, were much more limited on what we could do. The appearance of fairness doctrine has been in place the entire time. It wasn't as limiting when the council could accept their own testimony because the council could cure any appearance of fairness issues by holding that second public hearing. But now any ex parte contact becomes very problematic and there's really no way to cure it until it gets to the courts. So that's what you can expect to see. The city attorney's team is looking at it right now to make sure I dotted all the i's and crossed all the t's. But that'll be what's before the council next week. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to follow up.
No, I mean, it seems in an effort to amend a loosey-goosey process, which I appreciate that very technical term, we've really created a level of rigidity that residents struggle with, and so do we.
Yeah.
And so, given that it would take state level action to change how that process is designed, we really don't have a lot of discretion. We have sort of like these two options,
yeah,
which bind us in different ways. So it makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so what's coming next week to the council, would that be, I guess, let me back up and just say, how long will this process take in order to become official?
Well, the council could adopt the ordinance next week. And
Okay.
so it'd be like 5 days after that.
Okay.
And the changes, it is a fairly detailed ordinance in that the hearing examiner system is mentioned in a lot of places in the code. So we really had to go through and make sure we caught all those instances and made sure that we're consistent throughout. And it also requires an update to the development guidelines as well. So it's pretty dense, but I think we've got it covered.
And then if they do adopt it, the RFP process.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And as part of that revamp too, and we've talked to our current hearing examiner, we intend to go out for a RFP to, see if we can get others interested, or if Andrew wants to continue, and just do a competitive review process. So we haven't done that in a long time. So that'll be good. And again, Sound Laws is on board with that. They've looked at the ordinance and they've provided really good feedback on parts of it.
They understand that they'll be on the hook to participate in the RFP.
Yes, they absolutely do. And
Everybody loves applying for their job.
Yeah. And we built in too, and this was at the suggestion of Mr. Reeves, was building in a kind of a routine review period and a probation period. So when you get the ordinance, you'll see that every 4 years we'll have the opportunity to either continue if we're happy with the service, or go out for a new RFP for those services. And the first year of that 4 years is a true probationary period where either party can back out if it's not working. So
I think that's a good update.
Yeah. But is it possible that we could have more than one examiner that would rotate cases based on availability? And
oh yeah, and that was actually another change in the ordinance to make clear that, for example, Sound Law, where Mr. Reeves is typically our examiner, he's got other attorneys that offer these services within their group. So if he was unavailable, one of the others would fill in. And we've
conflict,
or if there's a conflict, and we've kind of codified that now in the code itself. Thank you. Good catch.
thanks.
That's all I had.
All righty. Robin, anything else? No comment?
I don't
Okay.
think so.
All righty. Well, unless anybody else has anything, why don't we adjourn a little early here? Thank you. Thank you all so much. This was
Thank you.
really good presentation.
Yeah. Thank you, Grant. Thank you,
Okay.
Hans and Rick, as always.
And hi to Ryan.
Yeah,
whose head
hi,
I
Ryan.
see over
Just see you on the edge of the screen.
I
There he
also leave Troy out. He's sitting off camera.
Oh.
Okay.
Hi, Troy.
All righty. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thanks.